you need to have your go-to-market strategy nailed, because if you don't have a clear path to sales growth, you're not going to succeed.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7 and 8 figure businesses, as well as founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we are always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Anthony Nitsos. And Anthony started his journey, went to the University of Michigan, did some pre-med, or went into the pre-med program, made it through the first year of medical school as part of, or part of that, and found it wasn't for him, so he decided to leave school and didn't know what he wanted to do. So went into the manufacturing, identifying problems and processes, became a process engineer and also studied accounting on the side. And then a recruiter found him for resource planning systems, and then went to, I think, a controller at a Japanese company, automated things, hardly had to work and got bored, decided to go on a different adventure and went to Scotland and studied for a bit, and then came back to the US, did some consulting, got hired as a VP of a financing business before shifting to the current business he's doing now that he'll share a little bit more about. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Anthony.
Thanks. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I just gave kind of a quick walkthrough to a much longer journey, but why don't we rewind and unpack that a bit more? Tell us a little bit more about how your journey got started, going off to college and or initially looking to go into the medical school.
So the University of Michigan program was actually an experimental one at the time. What they did was they took 50 students from across the country, from high school, waived the medical examination, this thing called the MCAT. You didn't have to take that. Basically admitted us to medical school at the age of 18 and took what would normally be your 4 years of undergrad and your 4 years of medical school and crammed it all into 6. So the idea was that if you take the pressure of having to study for the MCAT off our plates, and we didn't have to, take all these, sciencey classes, we could take classes that were more well-rounded. The idea was that you'd produce doctors that were a little bit more well-rounded, and ideally they wanted to produce physicians that were going to be going into primary care. So that was the program I got into. I was really honored, that I was one of the 50 selected that year for that. But when I got through the kind of the crammed undergrad part of it and ended up into the medical phase, I began to realize this was not for me, right? The only reason I entered into the program in the first place is, it was the University of Michigan. I lived in Michigan. The idea of becoming a doctor, hey, who wouldn't want to do that? That kind of thing. But once I got in it and realized the dedication that it takes, you really have to love what you're doing in order to dedicate that much time to it. And my heart wasn't in it. It really wasn't. And so I had a very, very difficult decision and a very difficult conversation with my parents about, yeah, I realize that I'm down this path, but I need to make a change. And so that's what I did. And I made the change to say, okay, I need to do something else. I didn't know what something else was. I was too young to really know and too inexperienced to really know where I should go from that point. It's not like I had some grand plan B to back up plan A for being a doctor. And so I found myself sitting there with okay, I'm going to leave this program. I'm going to need a job. I'm going to need to do something. And so it being Michigan and medicine and manufacturing, all starting with M, I guess, the stars aligned, and my first job ended up being actually in a manufacturing company. And as you pointed out, I ended up, first I was doing materials planning and resource planning, but in the end, my skill set was really much better suited to process reengineering, because I could go in and diagnose a system pretty quickly and figure out what the root cause of the problem was and offer solutions.
Hmm. So now just, or maybe backing up just a little bit, be a hit on there. So you said that, that you got into the medical program. Now, what was it? You mentioned a little bit, but what was it about the medical program? Was it, hey, hate the sight of blood? Was it, I don't want to work a doctor's hours, or I don't like interacting with patients, or, I don't want to go through another X amount of years of schooling, or any or all the above, or none of the above? What was the kind of that was that tipping point that kind of shifted you from the medical school direction over to more of the process engineering?
I think, there were probably two or three key things. Number one, I'm a pretty empathic person. I can really feel somebody else's pain when they're having it. And to be an effective physician, I think you have to have a certain amount of distance from that, not letting yourself get caught up in the emotions of your patients. The idea of telling somebody that they have terminal cancer, the idea of telling a parent that their child has got some sort of really bad illness, those things when they happened in the settings, because what they do is they start introducing you to patients, right? You start going on rotations with doctors and getting a feel for what the medicine's going to be. I knew emotionally I probably couldn't handle that. The idea of telling, if you have kids, I have kids, the idea of telling another parent that your son's going to die, that was a horrifying feeling to me. And so that was kind of one of the, like, from an emotional perspective, it's like, look, I don't think I have it in me to do that. And I think what would happen over time is that I would get burned out so quickly from that emotional load that I would be miserable, or who knows what could happen, other disastrous. The other thing
No.
is something that I was a little bit ahead of my time on, I think, is the idea of making money off of other people's illnesses just didn't sit well with me. The fact that I would be out there making my living off of, or the hospital systems or the for-profit companies were out there making money off of people's illnesses, off of what I consider to be a human right, not a human privilege. That was a philosophical thing that I had a real struggle with. And still do to this day. I mean, we can go off into a whole side, conversation about single payer healthcare systems and national healthcare systems. But the fact is that this United States spends more money per capita on healthcare, and yet we have the lowest healthcare outcomes of all the developed nations. It just tells you point blank, we're doing something wrong.
So
And a
it
lot
kind
of
of,
it
now
comes
as you did or go down that route, kind of had both some of those philosophical, as well as just I don't know, personality, matching up with the inherent, or your inherent strengths, and kind of aligning what you'd want to do. So you would offset, okay, living in Michigan, I think at the time, and you're saying, okay, what are the job opportunities? Kind of, or took a different direction. Now you went into processing or process engineering, and kind of identified that as a strength, and kind of walk us through a little bit, what was that evolution, because it took you along a different path, and presented some different opportunities, so maybe you walk through that a bit more.
I was surprised to find that a manufacturing company is really very similar to a human body, in that you have all of these interconnected systems and processes that if they're not working in harmony, you will get illness. The illness could be a stock out, it could be an overstock, it could be additional costs being incurred in some process somewhere. But what I found was that the methodology, the scientific training, the medical training that I was given up until that point was very useful for me to say, okay, we keep running out of this part. Why do we keep running out of this part? Of it? Is it because we're not ordering enough in time from the supplier? Is it because the warehouse is too far away and we're 3 states over and we can't get it over here? We need a staging area. What's going on here? So I was responsible for the material flow, but I had to go back in and say, okay, I keep getting stock out on this particular part. I need to find out why that's happening. And me, I just went and found out what was happening. Came back to my manager. I said, here's the situation. Here's where here's what's going on. Here's what I think what we should do to fix it. And she looked at me and she said, yeah, you're right. Let's just do that. And so that was kind of like, I went from being a logistics and material planner to a process re-engineer, just by dint of the fact that I took the initiative to go in and figure out what was going on. And so they started giving me those kinds of assignments. and said, "Hey, we got too much scrap on this line. Can you go in and analyze it and tell us what's going on?" And I'd go in and say, "Okay, well, this tool set here, what it's doing is it's producing a defective part, too many times out of 1,000, and those parts are getting down the line, and then they're just continue to get built on." So it was a lot of that, just kind of digging and asking five whys. I don't know if you ever heard that particular phrase. Just keep asking the question why until you get to the root cause. It was just the
Hmm.
fact that I could go in and start asking those questions. I'm just a young kid, right? I'm fresh out of school, looking at stuff. I didn't come from manufacturing, and so I had a different perspective on it. And so in the end, that's really kind of how it happened. It was just really more by accident than anything else. But I think I made that accident happen by the fact that I was willing to analyze these things. I was willing to go to root cause analysis without even knowing that that was a term of the system.
No, makes perfect sense. So now, so as you're doing that, as you're, kind of probably sounds like almost a bit naturally kind of gravitating towards that area. I think if I remember when we chatted a bit before, you also started to study accounting a bit on the side, as well as you got a recruiter that kind of came and pulled you over to another opportunity. Or walk us through that a bit more.
So, a word of advice that I had gotten from my late father was, if you're going to do anything in this world, be a professional, because they always have work, right? So doctor obviously is a professional, lawyer is a professional, CPA is also a professional. And I found that it was finding and financial information and accounting information came naturally to me. It was an easy thing for me to grasp. The first accounting class I had in college, it's like, oh, this is easy. I get this. This makes a lot of sense. I can see why this is such a powerful tool. And that advice from my dad, coupled with that very first accounting professor that I had, who basically opened my eyes to the fact that if you know the details of the accounting of a company, you know the company, because there isn't a single thing in the company that happens that doesn't ultimately land in the financial statements, doesn't ultimately land at the bottom line. There isn't a decision you make in a company that doesn't have a financial impact. So the accounting really is kind of like the electron microscope of the business world. It really allows you to dive deeply into and analyze what's going on. So I looked at that as, like, this is just another tool that I need, that I can use to analyze the problems that I have. And so I started, getting more and more into the accounting and more into the accounting aspects of things, and saying, okay, it's, if I'm doing a cost analysis on this process change, I now have the tools, and I'm continuing to grab the tools that I need in order to make that quantitative analysis really strong. And so I actually got my certification in management accounting, CMA. If you've never heard of it, they do exist, alongside of, the working in manufacturing. And that's where the ERP implementation headhunter found me. They said, "Oh, accounting and manufacturing. We don't really find too many people that have both of those skill sets in the same pocket. We'd like you to learn ERP systems, because there's this thing called Y2K coming." So this is back in the late 90s, where all of these computer systems have been set up for just two digits. We all know what Y2K is. So a lot of companies, large manufacturing companies, were going out there and they were buying these ERP systems, SAP, Bond, JD Edwards, MFG Pro, all these different systems, to bring them online in order to basically replace all their native code with, pre-built software that will do what they need, enterprise resource planning. And so that's how I got that job, was the fact that I knew manufacturing and I knew accounting and I knew process analysis. And a lot of ERP system setup is really going in and understanding business processes first, so that you can marry them up to the ERP system and make it really work for you. And so that's how I got that job, and very quickly moved up the ranks in that company. That was
Now,
actually a
is this the company that was in Japan and led you to there, or was that later on or as you continue down that route?
that was later on. So what happened was, we were doing that for a couple 3 years, and then it along comes 1999. So we're right at the year where we're in the year where the flip over is about to happen. ERP system implementations back then are not like they are today because everything today is in the cloud. When you implement NetSuite or you implement Intact, you don't have to buy your own hardware. You don't have to configure it. You just have to go through the software integrations and, basically get the thing set up and running, do your data migration, whatever it happens to be. But back then, you had to spend millions of dollars on computer equipment, then configure that, then get the ERP system up and running. So they took a lot longer, right? We're talking, in some cases, years to do these implementations. So if you didn't already have your ERP system basically the launch sequence is already going, you're already getting the implementation done by the beginning of 1999, it's too late. So what happened in 1999 is the sales of ERP systems cratered. There just weren't any new sales coming in because everybody who needed it had already bought it, right? Who needed it for this Y2K problem had already bought it. And the universe of companies out there that needed it that weren't being driven by Y2K was obviously a lot lower. So what happened was the teams started coming off of assignments and we didn't have new assignments to put them on. And so early in 1999, looking at the handwriting on the wall, I'm saying to the executive team, it's like, sales pipeline is drying up. We're not getting new deals. Can we take the personnel that we have right now and retrain them into, say, supply chain management or some other that we could take all this skill set and use? Yeah, that sounds like a great idea, Anthony. We'll take a look at that. Well, they didn't. And so by the time Q4 rolled around of 1999 and literally everybody was gone, except me and probably one small team, that's when I got the call 2 days before Thanksgiving that my services would no longer be needed. And I was just like grinding my teeth. I said, guys, if you had just retrained us in supply chain management, we could be selling those systems and implementing them now. But, it was TRW, it was a big corporation, probably hard for them to get things changed on the last minute like that. So there I was in the holiday season, 1999, looking for my next gig. And one of the things that I had done at that point, or I had already taken care of, was I spoke Japanese. I had learned it. I'd went to the country. I studied over there. And I also obviously had this ERP system in the manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera. Another placement firm, a headhunter, found me and said, hey, we've got this company in your backyard in Michigan. Was an English company, just sold to the Japanese. They need a new controller and they're going to grow their business 10 times in the next 3 years because they already have the contracts. So even though I had never held an accounting job in my life, my first accounting job was controller of a Japanese manufacturing company, 30 miles from my home in my own backyard. I didn't have to do any traveling. And that was the mission, was to set up all the systems, the financial reporting, the accounting systems, the data collection systems, in order to scale the company from 5 to 50 million in the next 3 years. And that's what I did.
So now you went over to Japan to, took on what was kind of this new role, new responsibility. Now, at some point you transitioned, or I think when we chatted, you kind of, automated the opportunity or the position to the point where it kind of got boring. It wasn't nearly as exciting. It didn't present as many opportunities that you wanted. And you ended up going off to Scotland from there. Maybe fill us in a bit more on that.
So got that job. In the next 3 years, we scaled it. Like I said, at the state of the art at that time was barcode scanning and data collection. I automated everything on all the financials that we could, so that by the time I'm in year 4, there really wasn't a whole lot of work for me to do. And so literally, there just wasn't that much work for me to do because everything was automated. All of the financial reporting and the data collection and all that was fairly well automated. And so if I had like an actual 8 to 10 hours of real work in a week, that was pretty normal for me. Otherwise, I was kind of literally sitting around reading the Wall Street Journal or just walking the factory floor, talking to people, just kind of trying to find something to do. I was bored. I really did not want to continue to work in a job where I was just drawing. I felt kind of morally wrong just drawing a salary for something where I'm not really working that much for it. I just had my own ethical standard, I guess. And the other thing was I'd really maxed out the job. There wasn't really much new for me to learn at that point. And so I said, where do I go next with this? And where I went next with this was basically along the lines of, you know, finance seemed to be like where I should go with this, right? Um, Devin, I'm sorry, can we take a pause?
Uh, yeah, sure. What's up?
I've got.
All right. So with the audience, as we try and keep this fluid and natural, sometimes things come up for a second. So we're back and had a temporary break and but unpaused. And so Anthony, why don't you continue to pick up? So you were you'd kind of automated a lot of your position, saying hey, ethically, or kind of keeping you involved and otherwise wanting to continue on. Things kind of shifted from that opportunity in Japan. And so it took you to Scotland. So maybe just kind of pick up from there as far as kind of how the journey evolved from there.
So accounting having been maxed out, IT kind of having been maxed out, manufacturing kind of having been maxed out, left medicine by the wayside. I'm like, okay, what's next for me? And when I looked at it, finance seemed to be the answer. Whereas accounting is looking at what's already happened, finance is forward looking, it's strategy, it's, working capital, it's, investment capital, it's a lot of decision making in terms of the obtaining of money and what you're going to do with it, and forward looking. And I looked at that and I said, this sounds like a kind of a natural next step for me, is to go from, kind of the rearward looking analytical side of things to the forward looking predictive side of things, taking the skills that I had. And so through a whole other story that kind of is off to the side, I ended up at St. Andrews, Scotland in their Masters of Finance program, getting my finance degree, and basically left my job, rented my house out, and went over to Scotland for a year and picked up my master's degree. And when I came back to the United States, that's when the fractional work and the career that I'm in right now really started. So I hooked up with a guy who already had a company, a small business running, providing fractional controller and CFO work to, at that time, a number of different companies in all sorts of industries, roofing, yoga studios. It really didn't matter, was, small businesses. Joined right in with him and just basically got on the ground and just started running and rolling. About 2015, a company here in Ann Arbor found me and found my company, and they said, we've got this fantastic company that's growing really fast. We need somebody to come in and help scale our back office and, really support the CFO in this endeavor. And that was the first unicorn that I worked on in SaaS. That was my first SaaS unicorn that I worked on. And that was Duo Security. And we had a really great exit. You can read all about it in the news. I immediately transitioned from that company to another company, another software company called LlamaSoft. Worked with their CFO for a while. That company exited to Coupa for another $1.5 billion. So back to back, I had two unicorns for a total of about $4 billion worth of exit. And I said, all right, I'm going to focus on SaaS. SaaS is it. Software as a subscription is really the cutting edge of technology. These companies need a lot of the help that I can do. And that's really where SaaS Gurus came from, is that kind of that point around 2015 or so, where I really had those two unicorn exits. And since then, that's what, the firm that I've created and have grown since into, and that's where we are today.
No, just on that note. So I mean, so you'd for a good portion of your career, you'd work for others. You'd worked in different positions. You'd had some evolution. Now, as you'd work for some of, as you said, the unicorn exits and working for in those positions, as you're making those exits, what made you decide to shift a little bit of direction to doing your own consultancy firm, doing your own business, as opposed to continuing to work for others? What kind of prompted that transition? There's always a difference between working for others and being very skilled in identifying problems versus having to deal with payroll or employees or marketing and sales and all the things that come along with running your own business. So kind of what led to that shift or a shift in direction or that evolution?
So from 2006 to 2015, my partner and I were the small business providing these fractionals. So we were entrepreneurs. We were self-employed at that point. I took the salary job because the opportunity just sounded really just fantastic. I'd worked with some SaaS companies before then, but never one intensely where I was coming in specifically working with that CFO to build the back office systems. I took that company when I got there, we were at 8 figures worth of sales. We increased it 10 times in the 3 years that I was there. So it was the second really rapid scaling that I had done, and putting in all those back office systems and working on the strategic planning and working on the financial planning and being involved in the investment rounds and really getting to know what the VC space for software companies looked like and how it operated, I realized that that's really where I wanted to be. Because right now, today, when I take a look at our client base, we have AI companies that are solving problems in all sorts of industries. It is a really incredibly dynamic world. And so while the salary jobs were great, they weren't the same as being my own boss. They really just weren't. I was taking orders from somebody else and direction from somebody else. But in the end, my father was an entrepreneur. I guess I got his genes. I'm an entrepreneur. I like the entrepreneurial world. And being the CEO of my own company, providing CFO and bookkeeping and accounting and all the back office stuff that we provide, that's where I like being. So for me, it was a kind of the salary job was a step back from the self-employment. And I realized that, you know what? I really prefer being CEO, not CFO, right? Right. I do CFO work, right? That's what we provide. But I'm the CEO of this company. I'm the one responsible for business development. I'm the one responsible for HR matters. I'm the one who's, running the strategic planning. I'm the one who's, basically running the company. That to me is a lot more exciting. And so that's why I like doing what I'm doing.
No, definitely makes sense, and sounds like it was a good additional evolution. Now, so you did that starting, you said, kind of around 2015 or so. So now you've had almost a period of 10 years now that we're into 2025, or coming up on a 10-year period. So kind of catches up. How's it gone? Has it been one where it's been a rocket ship to the top and money has rained down from the skies and more success than you know what to do with, or one where it's teetering around the verge of bankruptcy and never knowing how you're gonna make the next payroll, or somewhere in between? Kind of catch us up as to how that period's gone over the last 10 years or so.
The first 3 years were a little bit of a just kind of struggle through, but we've doubled revenue every year since. We're growing like crazy.
That's awesome. So if you to now take, okay, growing, like, take that 3 year period, which I think is, reasonable for a lot of companies, figure out your positioning, your messaging, kind of, kind of the services you want to provide, who's your ideal customer and clients, and kind of figuring out all that out takes a good period of time. So you took that as an opportunity, or figured that out over the 3 years, and then been taking off ever since. So now if you're to kind of forward look into the next, 12 or 6 to 12 months, kind of where do you see things are continuing to evolve or continue to head for you guys?
I think the transition we're making right now is one from a purely a referral based company to one that actually has an outbound strategy. So I'm looking at engaging with, a more formal marketing process where, so far all of our businesses come to us by word of mouth. The VCs that know the work that we do, board members that know the work that we do, the CEOs that we work for, knowing what we do and loving what we do, referring us clients. And so the growth has been, almost purely organic from the fact that it's all word of mouth. And those are great. That's probably the best way to grow at this stage of the game. But if I really want to expand this and reach out to more companies, I mean, there's probably 15, 16,000 SaaS companies in the United States right now. How do I reach more of those? And not just necessarily as clients, but as a thought leader in terms of, we have done a lot of this stuff and we've really honed our systems and we've really honed our processes so that when a client comes to us, we're ready to execute. We're not experimenting with them. We come in with a program and it's like step one, step two, step three, step four, and we've got you exactly where you're going to need, where you're standing in front of your board or your investors and your numbers are absolutely solid. And we can tell you what your cash is going to do for the next 18 months and you have believable numbers. We let CEOs sleep at night knowing that they know exactly where their cash is headed. That's a replicable process. Go back to the Japanese training. Replication of process is the key to quality. Reading the same thing over and over again so that When you go to McDonald's, for example, and you get a fillet of fish, it always tastes the same, right? You rely on that standard of this is what I expect I'm going to get. That's what we strive to do, is exceeding our clients' expectations, but in addition, giving them something that's a proven model. I think it's time for us to expand that. And so I'm looking at, okay, how do I get inbound lead generation? Where's that come from? I know who my ICP is. I know what the personas are. I know who my avatars are. I know exactly who I'm selling to and why and what their pain points are. How do I now scale this?
No, I think that sounds like some good direction and opportunities that you can continue to explore and pursue. So, with that, now as we've kind of caught up to the present day of the journey, and even looking a little bit as to where you guys are headed and what opportunities lie ahead, it's a great time to transition to the two questions I always like to ask towards the end of each episode. So we're going to jump to those now. So the first question I like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? And what'd you learn from it?
The worst business decision I ever made was to try and open up an import business from Brazil to import semi-precious stones and others into the United States. It was a total disaster. I didn't know the industry. I didn't know how it worked. I didn't know what the market looked like. It was almost an emotional decision with somebody who basically told me that they knew what they were doing, and I didn't check it out. I really didn't. I learned a lot from that, which is you really need to know an industry in order to function properly in it, and you really need to know your go-to-market strategy. Number one, you really need to know your go-to-market strategy if you're going to succeed.
No, I think that's that's a great learning to have and one to figure out as you're going along to avoid those mistakes down the road. Second question now that I like to ask is, so now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one rule of thumb you'd recommend?
Exactly what I just said. You need to have your go-to-market strategy nailed, because if you don't have a clear path to sales growth, you're not going to succeed.
Perfect. Well, that's definitely a great takeaway. So, well, now as we do wrap up towards the end of the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Two ways. First of all, my name is extremely rare. There are only two of us on the entire planet, and the other guy lives in Australia. I'm in the United States. Anthony Nitsos. If you Google my name, you're going to find me. So it's very easy to find. The second is my website, sasgurus.io. Go to /lab, download the ebook, and enjoy it. And if you like what you read there, I've got to contact us there. You can, like I said, you can find my email or just Google me.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, and expand their network, make a great connection. If nothing else, make a new best friend. So, well, with that, thank you again, Anthony, for coming on the podcast. It's been it's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveunicorn.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners. Make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review. Helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And along that note, if along your journey you ever need help with patents or trademarks or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we are always here to help. Well, thank you again, Anthony, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.